So, so there's a saying, you guys have all heard it, the two minds are better than one. We are going to put that to the test because he's not
Mimes?
mimes. Yeah, two mimes are better than one.
No one has ever said that.
So we have two minds here. I'm not
Oh,
sure. Yeah, two minds that we're going to try to be better than one. And considering the minds that anyway, let's give it a try. Brian, we discussed this in the green room that maybe you and I could brainstorm catalysts and see if we could come up with a better list as a brainstorming event than Hedgie and Gary Black and all these other guys that put out their
sure.
catalyst list. So what comes to mind immediately for you as a catalyst?
The first one is partnerships, because when we saw the partnership with Hertz, and it wasn't a partnership, it was just Hertz using the cars, it was it moved the stock. Any partnership on any aspect would do the trick. There was a story out of China. Tesla themselves published this press release, I guess, saying that a Model S with 320,000 kilometers on the odometer still had 88% battery. And that was because Tesla's battery management system is the best. And maybe that's still true. We won't know for another 12 years. But we know the battery management system has only gotten better. So maybe it could be something as little as Nissan agrees to use Tesla's BMS. That would be a headline. That would be something that would matter. And that's one that the haters would be hard pressed to attack, because they'd first have to understand what the BMS does to understand. All they could do is say, well, that's going to be, oh, well, I guess that company's going out of business. And everyone would say, no, Tesla's batteries survive certainly better than the industry average, and probably best of all.
So yeah, you said partnership. Another partnership, of course, that moved the stock a lot was Ford deciding to use the national North American standard for the charging system. So yeah, that's a good one. I like that one, Brian. Well, let's stop now. Oh, I'm sorry.
Quit well, we're way behind. I would also say Mexico is in the process of adopting their charging standard. And right now they've got, I think they're trying to say, well, we'll do three. We'll do the one that China likes, the Chatamo, and Tesla, because there's already a lot of Chinese cars on the road in Mexico. And the smarter advocates are saying, no. Look, it's already the standard in the US. Do we want cars from the US or not? We already know Tesla will be able to sell cars from anywhere with any charge port. Let's just go there. If we find out that the North American charging standard is actually the America's charging standard, that could be a catalyst as well, in the same way it was when Ford and others started one by one joining the network.
Yeah, that would be a good one. I like that one a lot. I was thinking in the same vein that maybe a final decision to go ahead and do FSD in a major country like China, start to sell FSD in China or in Europe, or Australia, that's not as big a deal, but in China or Europe, that would be a big deal. Do you think?
I think you're right. There was a story, you mentioned it on your show yesterday or the day before, where you said Europe already has the regulatory framework in place. They're just waiting for the ink to dry to allow a preliminary rollout of FSD across Europe. That could very well be a catalyst. It wouldn't hit the revenue until the end of Q2. So we'd be talking end of what would that be, July, when we find out if there's revenue from it. Here's a catalyst for you that I haven't seen, is this 1 month trial of FSD that's been made available or is being made available on all eligible cars. And an eligible car is just something with, I think, hardware 3 or newer, maybe 2.5 or newer. That's going to result in new subscriptions. I've already seen people on X, people who I know are real people, saying, I just tried it. I'm in. I'm in. This works now. For just in the US, if you figure 1 million cars, every 1% of take rate results in an extra $2 million in net profit per month. And if you're going to do so at 10%, you're talking $20 million. That's a month, a month.
Right.
That's just in the US. Now add Canada, now add Australia. Those have been added. And if Europe is added next, or China, or both, all of a sudden the picture for the state of FSD as it exists today, not in the future, but today, becomes very different. And we'll start seeing more revenue accounted for and more revenue showing up. And unlike purchases, the subscription option is fully booked at the end of the month. That's real money that's done and gone and counted, because you didn't sign up for some future product. You signed up for what you can use today.
What do you think it would take? Speaking of Mexico, what do you think it would take for Mexico Gigafactory to actually be a stock catalyst? I mean, getting a few pieces of equipment on the ground in Mexico and starting to dig dirt, I don't think is going to move the stock at this point. It's taken too long. So it'll just be like, oh, they're finally doing it. I don't think it's going to change anything. Is there something that you think would actually move the stock in terms of the Mexico Gigafactory?
Okay. So yes, vertical columns. That's what did it in Shanghai. Once we saw enough vertical columns and could measure the pace, is about when the stock turned around. That was the low in 2019. They were saying just a dirt field, it's mud. They're just pushing dirt back and forth. And I was looking at it and I was counting squares. I was tracking the progress, even though I didn't have a channel yet. Yes, this is what I do even when I'm not on camera. And it was at that point that I said, I'm willing to buy this stock at this price based on the strength of Fremont and Shanghai alone, because those two things will make it outperform the S&P over the next 10 years. That was my confidence. And I knew that the truck announcement was coming. We didn't know it was a Cybertruck. And there was a lot of that wasn't counting anything for autonomy or any of the other projects that had not yet been announced. So I think once we've got vertical columns, we will see the size of it. We will understand the scale of it. And especially if there's any kind of hints as to what the compact might actually be, all of that could absolutely be a catalyst.
Well, you mentioned Cybertruck, and we keep thinking that Cybertruck is going to be a catalyst. Gary Black, again, famously always talking about the halo effect, always talking about when there's units being produced, all these different reasons. But I haven't been able to see, other than maybe when it was first brought, started the production, the handover, all that, there might have been a little tick up as a result of that. But other than that, I haven't really seen a Cybertruck catalyst at all yet. Now we've got the announcement of 1,000 a week last week. That didn't seem to move the stock. When does the catalyst happen with Cybertruck?
It could be as early as the earnings report. If we find out, we could find out on the earnings report that, by the way, these trucks we've been selling for 100 to 120 already cost us a paltry 80 or less. And if that's the case, we know the price can start coming down. If they're already down to 70-ish, so they would have some margin to sell at 80, maybe it's game over, because that means that they could end Foundation Series sales, which I don't think they should until they exhaust the supply of people willing and able to buy them at 100 to 120. If we find out that they're revenue positive at a price at 80, it would open the floodgates, because this truck is already, the sales figures are bonkers. I've seen some terrible prognosticators saying that it would only sell 3,400 next quarter, to which I say, if you're following that person, you're following the wrong person, because that number is wrong. It doesn't make sense. But he's blocked me, so I can't tell him that, because I called him out on it and he didn't like that. So, but yeah, so the Cybertruck, when we see the sales figures, and I hope Tesla will at some point say, I don't think they're going to break it out in the earnings report. I think it'll still be lumped in with other, which includes semi and S and X. I think semi is not really producing. So that's just another future proofing way to hide those sales when they eventually arrive. But I think what we could see is the kind of announcements where they say, by the way, today we just produced our 10,000th truck or something like that, where we get a snapshot. And if they say, wait a minute, you just outsold the Lightning, or you outsold the Lightning, the Hummer, the
Yep.
Silverado, and the Rivian, or whatever it may be combined, when that number hits, that could be that could be a real wake-up call, because the real limit to selling EV pickups for most manufacturers is your appetite for losing money. And if Tesla's not losing money, that changes the game.
So then we have, of course, my number one absolute favorite, which is the Optimus. And, everybody's in the game now. I think it's kind of watered down the story just a little bit right now, because everybody's coming out with backflips and talking robots and all these different kinds of aspects. And so for Tesla to get their story in the lead again, what do you think it takes? We talked yesterday about the possibility that maybe they would spit some out, out of they've got, they're working on a line. I don't think anybody else is working on a factory line at this point. So maybe that factory line starts to crank out 3 a month or something, or 5 a month. I don't know. What do you think? What's it going to take to get Tesla back into the forefront of the Wall Street's mood on robots?
I don't see a catalyst on bots. I think even if they were out, even if they were doing tasks, and I just don't see it being a catalyst yet. I think until the novelty settles and the utility appears, it's not going to be a catalyst. I could be wrong on that, of course. We could both be wrong. The bigger one I see that could happen this year is that we get meaningful data on the development of Dojo, and it's good. When Dojo is complete and it works as expected, that would mean the end of purchasing from NVIDIA. And that would impact NVIDIA as well, because Tesla is a substantially large customer of theirs. They make up a good chunk of NVIDIA's revenue. Now, NVIDIA has cajillions in revenue and Tesla only buys hundreds of millions, but that's still a chunk you don't want to see gone. And especially if Dojo is ramping and then Dojo as a service were to come online, all of a sudden, Tesla's not a customer of NVIDIA, they're a competitor. And that could be a real story.
Yeah. So I always wonder whether things in the supply chain, even if they're amazing, can be market movers. But we've got two in particular right now that are coming along, and that's 4680, and it's also the plant down in Corpus Christi that will refine the lithium. Once they start actually refining lithium and producing lithium, and it's great, the right grade, it's been qualified to be used, and or we hit some milestone with regard to 4680, could either one of those move the market?
No. and I'll tell you why. So 4680, the next thing there's two things we're looking for. One is the volume to substantially increase. Right now, it's doing okay. It's doing fine. It's not doing great. It's doing fine. The other is for the performance to get to where it needs to get to. And who knows, maybe they're already there and there'll be a software update to unlock some of that capacity. But I don't think either of those would move the stock. We've seen battery improvements before. They don't move the stock. So not that. In terms of the Corpus Christi plant, it's not going to be operational until at the very earliest, the end of the year. So we'd be looking sometime in 25 to see anything from that. And I just don't think Wall Street will appreciate it. And especially because in terms of the total supply of lithium that Tesla needs, it's not enough. But you did make me think of one that could do the trick. Tesla has purchased LFP manufacturing equipment from, who was it? CATL.
Yeah.
If Tesla announces, by the way, we're now making in-house LFP batteries, that could be a real boom, because they need those batteries for the rear-wheel drive version of the Model 3 so that it would qualify for the IRA credit. Because right now we're in a weird situation where the Model Y is cheaper than the Model 3, depending on the configuration you get, just because many of the Model 3s do not qualify for that incentive because they do not have locally sourced batteries. So if Tesla were to say the LFP line is running, the Model 3 is back on the menu for the discounts, that could be something where Wall Street gets it, because they already know all about LFP. They already know the benefits of it. The customers know the benefits of it. There was a recent story that said if you get your battery changed, replaced under warranty, in many cases you can now opt to take an LFP battery instead of a high nickel battery. And on the surface, you'd say, why would I want a heavier battery with less range? And the answer is because it's going to last for the rest of your life, and you can charge it to 100. So even though it has less range on paper, in practice, it really doesn't have that much less. So it would be the customers get what LFP is. The analysts do because it's easy enough for them to wrap their giant brains around. And I could see that being a catalyst. I don't know if that will happen this year, but I don't know. I would expect that also to be more like a 2025 story.
Okay. And then if we have, of course, the big one that everybody talks about, I mean, even the street talks about it, is, of course, the Gen 3 vehicle, which to me is kind of funny because you have to make 4 times as many Gen 3 vehicles to make the same amount of profit as you make on Cybertruck. So I'm not exactly sure why the Gen 3 is such a big deal, but I guess it would also be 4 times as much revenue on robotaxis eventually. So that would be a big deal. Okay, so what has to happen?
Let me answer on the Gen 3. Great points. So a $25,000 car versus a $100,000 truck. The truck's not going to be 100,000, not for long. Soon it'll be 80, soon it'll be 60. So really it's more like 2-ish, 2.5-ish compacts for every Cybertruck. And like you said, the real money is going to be in the autonomy, whether that's robotaxi, whether that's FSD as a subscription. And I wouldn't be surprised to see regional pricing for things like FSD, just like you see with Starlink. Starlink is cheaper in some countries because we have the capacity anyway. We're not using it while it's flying over Africa. Make it affordable. And Nigeria last year rolled out this new policy that said you are no longer allowed to send money out of the country in amounts larger than $20. And Starlink was something like $35 a month. And so Starlink effectively went out of business in Nigeria, except they didn't. They said 20, huh? Okay. And now it's $20 for Starlink in Nigeria.
Right.
So that's magical. I could see FSD as a service, as a subscription being offered in South America, in Africa, in India for a significantly smaller amount of money, because the work has already been done. The hardware is already there. Just get people to use it so we can get some revenue out of it. So I think and in terms of the Gen 3 being a catalyst, Franz was asked, what's the most exciting vehicle you've ever worked on? You remember what he said? He said, the next one.
The next one. That's right. That's right.
I can't talk about it, but it is by far the most exciting vehicle I've ever worked on. If Franz is excited about it, and you've seen the things he's designed, the Roadster, the Cybertruck, the Pontiac Starfire, what was it called? Sunfire. Okay, maybe not that one, but I think he did design that. So there was, I think the Model 3, the compact models announcement could absolutely be a catalyst. I think it's going to be something some people can wrap their head around, and the people who can't won't see it as a negative.
Gotcha. Well, anything else come to mind as we?
Yes, there's a big one you're overlooking, which is the Cyber Hammer could be sold with Dogecoin. No, I don't think that one would actually do it. No, I engaging with the media in a more helpful way would do it.
Oh,
they're very confrontational and even hostile to even their biggest fans, even folks like you and I. If you and I were to call Aptera and say, may I come in for a site visit? They'd say, come on in, tell me when. But even though we barely mention Aptera, if you and I were to call Tesla and say, may I come in? They'd say, your call has been forwarded to an automatic voicemail box. The voicemail box is full. And I think if they were to, not necessarily you and I, but engage with anyone the way they used to have, when track mode was unveiled, they held track mode day where they invited all the media, including the YouTubers and Twitter personalities at the time, to come in and check it out. And that resulted in so much positive coverage, and the positive coverage, disseminates from there. If you look at the coverage BYD gets in the mainstream media, it's universally positive. And that's because the original source material, the first-hand original reporting, is all done in a very controlled place. Chinese media, largely Chinese state-run media, and all of the recycled garbage is based on that original source. So let's get more original sources excited about it. You see, when people like Doug DeMuro, who has not always been friendly to Tesla, when he gets his hands on a Cybertruck, it becomes one of the highest scoring vehicles he's ever driven. And that's not an easy feat.
Yeah.
And he was, I feel a little bitter that he wasn't among the few selected to go in and drive it before it was delivered, but sorry.
So to wrap this up, and this will just be kind of a
yes, would you?
Yes, just a philosophical question, which I'm sure there's no real answer to it. Maybe you at least have an answer, that we could contemplate and think through. When I say that we thought Cybertruck would be a huge catalyst, and the stock is sitting pretty much where it was, 6 months ago. And then we've seen the rollout. We've seen the people falling out of their windows trying to take pictures. We've seen the stars that are, the biggest stars on the planet driving the vehicle, pictures being shot with them driving the vehicle. We've seen all of these top YouTubers coming out and doing the reviews, outstanding reviews, calling it the most amazing car ever, the best car they've ever driven, the best stereo system, the quietest car. Drives like a Rolls Royce. I mean, how much better could these reviews be? And yet the catalyst hasn't happened. Contemplate look into your future or past, whatever it is, capabilities that you have. Why do you think that's true?
I've seen people say, Brian, people like you, people like Randy, you're just stock pumpers because you own a literally insignificant percentage of the company. And to that, I say, you think I'm flattered that you think I have the ability to move the stock. That is wow. When the Cybertruck delivery event happened, you had MKBHD, you had CarWow, you had Carmudgeon, you had Sandy Monroe, and between them, the last number I saw was 60 million views. Now it's probably closer to 100 million views or north of that. All of them raving about this car. Carmudgeon saying, I hated it. Here's why it's brilliant. And nobody told him what to say. He doesn't have to say nice things if he doesn't believe them. And everything he said was supported. He's got an engineering degree, I think, or at least background. And so if that's not going to move the stock, you and I are powerless. So why didn't it move the stock? To answer your question, long story short, too late, is that I believe the people who would buy into Tesla are you and me, and we're already maxed out. There's only so many shares we can buy, and it's a big company. If I were to buy another 1,000 or 2 or 10 or 100,000, it wouldn't move it one penny. And the people who despise Tesla aren't going to buy it no matter how good the Cybertruck is, because, as you know, Daddy Bad Tweet is a monster and can't be trusted and will be the downfall of humanity. How dare he?
Okay, well, there you go. I'll cogitate on that. Our codger. I suppose I should move into I cogitate now instead of cogitate. What do you think? Anyway,
I think you're my favorite codger, Randy.
Well, that's good. That's good. Glad to hear that. My mother says the same thing, and she's really a codger. All right. Brian, as always, so thankful to have you come on here and think through these things with me because, as I said in the beginning, two minds are better than something. I'm not sure exactly what, but I'm sure maybe in the comments below, tell us what two minds are better than. That would be an interesting thing. And follow him. When I point like this, does that actually point?
That's a correct direction on my side, at least.
Well, if I point, I don't know. I don't know what it actually turns out. Some things are backwards.
That's all right.
You know, I'll point ways like that. There you go. Anyway,
Yeah.
follow him. Follow him at future Arizona. Future Asa, you were saying. Future Asa. This is all marketing. Brian doesn't believe it. He thinks I'm just making fun of his channel. But you see, when I say all those weird versions, it makes you think about it more, makes it more of an impression, more of a stamp on your brain, and you're more likely to actually go follow him and send money to his Patreon.
I just thought you were slipping more than a mime on an invisible banana peel. Two mimes, so much better than one.
With that, we must say adieu. Thank you, Brian, as always, and to all of you out there. It's been great talking to you.